All right, everyone. Welcome into just another edition of Just Another College Football Podcast, our very first Sunday show, Sunday reaction for you here today for a crazy Week 8 that we just saw yesterday. We're going to start with all the ranked matchups, get those out of the way, a little bit easier to kind of parse those. We'll get into Georgia, Ole Miss, Vanderbilt, LSU, the Holy War. Notre Dame gets a big-time win as well as Alabama. Then we got some upset alerts all around the country. Miami fell, Nebraska, Texas Tech, Memphis, and a couple of teams that barely snuck away from losses. Then we got a couple of whip around topics. The Big Ten is just rolling right along. We will talk about Billy Napier. He was fired about 15 minutes ago. We will get into all that craziness as it unfolds. But let's go ahead and jump into this. And let's start with what I consider to be the game of the day, and that was Ole Miss Georgia. Georgia gets a win, 43 to 35 in this one. This was weird in a lot of different ways. This was a game that neither defense played good football pretty much throughout it. And the Ole Miss defense didn't get a stop the entirety of the game. The Georgia defense didn't get a stop until the fourth quarter, but they found a way to get the job done. The way they have pretty much the entirety of the season, they made one more play than their opponent, and they did just enough. Gunnar Stockton was downright incredible in this football game. 5 incompletions, 5 total touchdowns. Trinidad Chambliss was not too far off from him. Over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, no turnovers. I think the big difference here was Georgia was able to run the football, went for over 200 yards on the ground, 4.5 yards per carry, and kept the ball for over 37 minutes of this football game. And in a game that's going to be a shootout, that's going to be intense, that's going to come down to the wire, you find the offense that's on the field a little bit more often tends to win the football game. So Georgia was able to do the one thing that Ole Miss was not really able to do in this game, and that was run the football and kind of elongate drives as much as possible late in the football game. But Lane Kiffin and Trinidad Chambliss were downright perfect early in this game. I mean, the first 5 drives went 65 yards, 75, 75, and 75 yards. They ripped the ball down the field. They were incredibly efficient, ran everything the exact way they wanted to, and in the first half, that had happened to Georgia a couple of times. They had gotten gashed in the first half for pretty much every game this season. In the second half, they just kind of kept going about their business until that one big play from Dalen Everett late in that game for Georgia, but at the end of the day, this Georgia team has something. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it can win a title, if I'm being totally honest. I know this team has something in them to where whenever the other team goes up, they find a way to get back. They find a way to punch back. They find a way to make one big play in that moment, and they get back the lead, or they tie the game, or they put pressure back at the feet of the other team. And that's a really tough thing to do, especially this consistently the way that they're doing it. In the Tennessee game, that team was pretty much dead to rights, and they found a way to come back in that one. In this game, they continue to get punched in the face. They continue to have to respond to Ole Miss's offense, and they find a way to do it. This is a mentally tough team, and you look around the country, I can't say that about everyone. I can say that about a couple of teams around the country, but a lot of teams haven't been tested to a huge degree. Some other teams I just don't fully trust. I know what I can get from this Georgia team. I know that they're going to come out every single time, and no matter what happens on the other side of the field, they're going to make one more play. They're going to find a way to make one more play. Now, the question is, can you do that against an Ohio State? I'd be shocked, but I don't think you have to worry about that for a little bit. So this is a very good football team that's just finding a way to win. Gunnar Stockton's playing elite football. They're running the ball really efficiently right now. They're doing some things that I think is going to benefit them in the long run, and frankly could get them to the top of the heap in a SEC that's going to come down to stuff like that. Can you make that one more play? Can you push that team to that limit? That one Saturday is going to make the big time difference. Georgia can do that. That has been proven, no doubt about it. Now, you move forward, I don't know how confidently you feel about these two teams with those defenses, but I tend to believe they're going to have enough to get to the CFP, really both of them. Ole Miss still has a schedule that sets up really nicely. You probably got to beat Oklahoma this weekend just to keep that confidence up and not tumble too far, but definitely one that you can get done and then move on to an 11-1 or 10-2 season. Same exact thing for UGA. They still have Florida after the bye week. They have Georgia, or they have Texas. They have a number of big time teams on deck the rest of the season. They absolutely can get to at least 11-1, probably 10-2, and be in a really good position both for the SEC title and the CFP, depending on where that loss comes from. But they get Florida after the bye, so they get the new head coach. They don't get Billy Napier anymore. They get Jabbar Jalouk, and we'll see how that works out for Florida. We'll talk about more of that later, but Georgia gets a win. They find a way to get a win the way they did at Auburn, the way they have a number of times this season. They find a way to get a win, and they move forward with still only one loss on the record. LSU falls to Vanderbilt. There's a lot of things that I'm wrong about when I talk about college football. None of them more than Brian Kelly's LSU. I've been on this ride every single year because I saw what Jaden Daniels was capable of in that offense. I saw what they had become with Garrett Nussmeier and what they could be. And then I saw what this defense was this year. They just keep finding a way to lose. And outside of an incredible play by Xavier Thomas, this game isn't close. LSU gets pretty much dominated in this football game, especially on the lines of scrimmage where Vanderbilt did essentially whatever they wanted. They ran the ball all over them pretty much the entire afternoon. Diego Pavia hit all the right buttons the way that he usually does, and LSU just wasn't in this football game for much of it. Now, that's not fair. They were in this football game. I didn't feel like they had a shot of really winning this football game for much of this game. I think they really were outmatched for a lot of it, and not something that should really happen at LSU. That's not to take anything away from Vanderbilt, but LSU should never look outright overmatched. They should look sometimes beat. They should look sometimes out schemed, sometimes out coached. You should never look just outright outmatched, and you were this last afternoon. You have been a couple of times during the Brian Kelly era. We'll talk about that in a second, but there's a ton to say about Vandy. There's plenty of things to say about Vandy, but this team is really good. And I don't think it's a Vanderbilt being really good or a Kansas being really good a couple of years ago. This team's just really good at football. They find a way to run the football really efficiently. They have a quarterback that fully understands the offense, an offense that I don't know how you stop it. As a defensive coordinator, it felt like Blake Baker hit every single button he knew to hit throughout this football game, brought a blitz from every direction, brought different personnel, put different guys on the field, never had an answer. Diego Pavia just kept making plays. They totally hem in the fourth down. Diego Pavia releases it to MK Young, and he makes a big-time play. They bring a corner blitz and almost get to him. He steps up and runs for a touchdown. It's just every time. It felt like LSU was ready to make that big play and flip the momentum. Diego Pavia got loose and made a big time play. So I don't know what you do when you move forward. Now the big time thing the thing that I kind of circled as I was looking at this game was the final quarter was kind of LSU season and kind of Brian Kelly's time at LSU in a lot of ways. You have a massive play from Caden Durham that gets you down to the Vanderbilt 2-yard line. You then have a penalty and a negative 1-yard run, an incompletion, and then you kick a field goal. They got two more chances to tie this game while only being down 7 after that moment. When they cut it to 7 with that field goal, they got two more chances to tie the game. They had 6 plays for negative 10 yards and 2 3-and-outs. It's just all over the place. And the offense, Garrett Nussmeier is part of the problem. He is far from the biggest problem with this football team. The offensive line is an outright issue. They're not calling plays that are super conducive to the offensive line being an outright issue. It's just not a team that is where it needs to be offensively, and that falls on a lot of people's shoulders. Garrett Nussmeier, Joe Sloan, but mainly Brian Kelly, and we'll talk about that here in a second. Overall, I think Vanderbilt just did a really good job of keeping an LSU defense that wants to attack. They kind of kept them on their back foot, or at the very least, when they did attack, used it against them. Every single time that LSU was flying in from the edge or ready to make a big-time play, they just sidestep it and make a first down or run for a touchdown or do something incredible in this game. They just continued to find a way. Diego Pavia was downright special, had over 200 yards, had 3 touchdowns on the day, just a really, really good football player. LSU, I really don't know what to say. I think it's a team that is going to miss the mark yet again. It's going to be a team that was plenty talented to make a little bit more of a run than they did, and I think you got to do it. I think you got to get rid of Brian Kelly. I think there's a lot of different momentum around there to do it, and here's the reality. There's a lot of people making the argument that you can't afford to do it. You can't do it with the buyout. I get that. That is definitely a part of this conversation, especially now. You're going to lose that money one way or the other, whether it's through a buyout over the next couple of years or it's through rosters that do nothing for you. The way they have the last 4 years, you're going to lose that money. You might as well lose it to a guy that actually can do some good and have a guy coaching your team while you're losing that money that you feel confident in, that you can put more money behind. It is going to be an expensive venture. I'm not arguing that. I think you got to pull the trigger. I don't think it's going to get better this year because the O-line is an outright problem. I don't think it's going to get a whole lot better. For Vanderbilt, they roll into a game against Missouri that's just downright massive. They win that one at home. This team is CFP bound. That's going to be an incredible thing to watch, but at the end of the day, it's an elite football team that just playing good football. I don't think we have to reason around Vanderbilt anymore. I think they're just a good football team. We can talk about them that way going forward. BYU finds a way to win the Holy War 24-21. This is a weird one. There's a lot of different things that happened in this game. I think the big thing that I want to talk about first is when I was breaking down this football game, there's one thing that's abundantly clear about these two teams. if their quarterbacks don't make plays with their legs, they're probably not going to win football games. That's the way it's always broken down for these teams the last couple of years, really, but especially this year with Devon Dampier and Bear Bachmeier. Those two guys have to make plays with their legs if those teams are going to win games. Bear Bachmeier made the play with his legs. The 22-yard run is downright special. It's the moment that BYU was able to kind of salt away this game, kind of dominated the fourth quarter, got back-to-back scores, got an INT during that time. They played really good football, and it's a BYU team that, I'll be totally honest, I wasn't fully bought in before this week, and it's a team that I'm going to be watching pretty closely moving forward. It's a really, really fun football team that does all those little things correctly. There's nothing that they miss. There's no terrible penalties. There are misses at points, but there's no terrible penalties. There's no, shoot yourself in the foot for no reason turnovers. There are moments in games where you can just win by not making the mistake. It's something that a lot of people around the country have figured out, and it makes them look a little bit boring or a little bit not interesting, but they make winning plays, and the home atmosphere played a massive, massive role in this game. BYU only had 5 penalties for 42 yards. Utah had 12 for 77 yards. That really hurts your offensive efficiency when you can't stay in front of the chains. Utah turned the ball over twice. BYU turned it over 0 times. This is one of those games where Utah, if you look at the box score and you cut out the penalties and you cut out the turnovers, to be fair, if you cut out those two things, Utah dominated this game in a lot of ways. You can't turn over the football, especially on the road. You can't have penalties, especially on the road, or they're going to jump on top of you. But Utah turns the ball over twice inside the 15-yard line, once more inside the 30-yard line. It's just a game that I think Utah's going to want back, and a year in a lot of ways that I think Utah's going to want back, because I don't think you're going to be able to get back into this fight. BYU currently sits as the only fully undefeated Big 12 team, the only one of two that's undefeated in Big 12 play, along with Cincinnati. It's one of those things where I think it's too crowded of a top. Utah already has 2 losses. You'd have to fight your way back in and get a ton of help the rest of the way. We'll see what happens. They get Colorado next week and then Cincinnati. BYU looks to be rolling towards a Big 12 title. They got a lot of roadblocks. They got Iowa State next week, then at Texas Tech, then Cincinnati later. You got to find a way to get a couple of wins there. If you can find a way to beat let's say they beat Iowa State and beat Cincinnati and lose to Texas Tech, you could very well get another shot at the Red Raiders. You got to be able to win at least 2 of those 3 games, and I think they can do it. It's a very, very well-coached team by Kalani Sitake. It's a quarterback that is downright fearless right now, and they're finding a way to win football games. They're running the ball very efficiently with LJ Martin, and I would not sell any BYU stock if you have it right now. Notre Dame gets the win 34-24 over USC. This is one of those games. There's many different ways to look at a football game. There's many different nuances that make a football game. Sometimes one team just runs the football and one team doesn't. That's what happened in this football game. 306 yards for Notre Dame, 68 for USC with the sack yardage included in the 68. But Jeremiah Love was dominating. He went 228 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown, had some help in the air as well. He was the player that we all know he's capable of being, which is maybe the very best in America. This dude is downright special. USC had no answer to him. There's no doubt about that. So USC was in this game into the fourth quarter. It looked like a game that was going back and forth. Notre Dame misses the extra point after a touchdown. You're thinking that might have just opened the door for USC. But in the fourth quarter, they got a missed field goal from Notre Dame, got a little bit of momentum, then fumbled the ball right back to them. Then they had a downs and an INT to finish the game. The offense just kind of went flat, and that's all the credit in the world to Notre Dame's defense. They're finding a groove on the defensive side of the ball. It's far from perfect, but if they can play man coverage with Christian Gray on one side, Leonard Moore on the other, they can do a lot of special stuff. I can promise you that. And the Notre Dame defense is doing just enough. That's all they need to do the rest of the season. Get them to 10-2, get them in the playoff, and then we've seen what they can do in those moments. So there's some huge, huge players on this football team. 3 turnovers, really good tackling. It's a defense that just is finding a way to make enough plays, and that's something that they're going to have to do the rest of the way. For USC, I think you missed a shot here. Nebraska loses on Friday. The door was wide open for you to jump right through it. You get Nebraska later in the season, then you get Oregon. I think you could be a 9-3 team, and you're much better than Lincoln Riley teams have been in the past. So you continue to move in the right direction. This was a moment where you could kick down the door, and you left it a little bit on the table. That being said, there's still a lot of positives to bring out of the season for USC. As long as you can find a way to get to at least 9-3, if you find a way to beat Oregon, you can knock them out of the CFP and get in yourself. So a lot still on the table for USC, but a lot to fix, especially in the run fits, or it's going to be a very long end of the year. Then you got Alabama, gets a what ended up being a dominating win over Tennessee. It's one play. And I know that sounds really lame, but it's one play. They had the pick six right before half with Xavier Brown going the entire length of the field the other direction. Tennessee looks like they're throwing to go down by 2. Then Alabama's up 16 going into halftime, and you're thinking, what just happened? And the game was kind of over from there. Now, Tennessee obviously had a couple of chances to get back into it, but overall, you can't give an Alabama offense like that 16 points to work with, or they're going to bury you. They're too good. And they went over 90 yards, 10 plays over 90 yards multiple times. It's just one of those offenses that executing at an elite level, you can't give them the opening that Tennessee gave them, and Joey Aguilar really gave them in a lot of ways. But the Alabama offense continues to roll. Ty Simpson, 253, 2 touchdowns. The run game did enough. Now I think they're going to need a little bit more of it going forward, but they continue to do just enough with Jamarian Miller, Daniel Hill, and all those guys. But it's one of those things that you're probably going to need a little bit more going forward. Overall, you're not going to be able to stop this group consistently. One way or the other, they're going to find a way to score points. You got to make sure you keep that defense on their heels, and it's a very hard thing to do at this very moment. Alabama really does a great job of just putting pressure on the other team, just making sure that the other team always feels it every third down, every big third down that Ty Simpson makes. The other team's just feeling a little bit more nervous every single time, and it's something that is going to be huge, especially in the SEC where you have a lot of shaky teams, a lot of good teams, but a lot of teams that are far from perfect. You put pressure at their feet, then they might crumble in some of these moments. Alabama's been able to do that time and again, and it's really hard to parse what this team is. In week 1, they look terrible. There's no two ways around that. I think they understand that. It's not the same football team. And I think if you're having an argument with someone and they say, well, they lost to Florida State and Florida State's terrible, you're not having a real conversation anymore. That was a very different 2 football teams than what we have right now. But at the end of the day, Alabama's doing enough. Tennessee, CFP is still firmly on the table. At Kentucky next week, which we'll talk about that game that happened in the next segment, but that might get a little bit weird. Oklahoma, Florida, and Vanderbilt to finish. You can get it done. You can beat Oklahoma. You can beat Vanderbilt, and you can find a way to get to 10-2. It could be for Tennessee, Vanderbilt for a spot in the CFP at the end of it, as crazy as that sounds. For Alabama, you get South Carolina, and then you get a chance to breathe after the craziness that was October and late September for you. Now you get a chance to breathe, and then you get an LSU team that who knows what they look like. Maybe they're coming off a win over Texas A&M. Maybe they're kind of reeling after a couple losses in a row. But overall, just an incredible weekend. These ranked matchups all really delivered in a lot of different ways. Alabama controlled theirs a little bit, but I think if you take away that one play, a lot of things change a lot quickly. Notre Dame runs the ball all over USC and does what they do. BYU gets a huge win in the Holy War, puts them right up, probably at the top of the Big 12, right the second along with Cincinnati, as crazy as that sounds. Vanderbilt gets a big-time win over LSU that I think is program-defining moving forward. And Georgia finds a way to outlash Ole Miss in a game that I think is going to be massive for the CFP moving forward. But we'll get into all of it as it unfolds, of course. Let's get into the crazy upset alerts we saw all around the country. We'll get into that right after this. We'll talk about Miami, Nebraska, Texas Tech, Memphis, and a couple of teams that just avoided being on this headline. We'll talk about it right after this, so stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the 5 ranked matchups we had this past weekend. Georgia gets a big win. Vanderbilt sends a statement throughout the country as they are one to do at this point. We have BYU getting a win in the Holy War. Notre Dame and Alabama getting relatively comfortable wins in their ranked matchups against Tennessee and USC, But let's get into the upset alerts and a number of close calls that teams just got away with right now. And let's go ahead and jump in. Let's talk about Miami. They did the thing again. They do the thing every single year, and I don't know what to make of it at this point. I don't know who's to blame. Well, I know who's to blame in this instance. Carson Beck had 4 INTs in this football game. The first one I think was not terrible because I think he put it almost exactly where he wanted to put it. The DB made a great play in Antonio Watts. The rest of them were tough. Now, a couple of them were good plays. It's not to say they weren't good plays by Louisville, especially the last one, just a very good instinctual play. It's rough. it's one of those games that there's a couple of games every single time coming from someone that watched a lot of Carson Beck at Georgia. There's just some of these games that don't make much sense. His eyes aren't in the right spot. He's throwing balls into coverage. It just looks wrong from the jump, and it never really turns a corner. Hopefully, it's out of his system the rest of the way, and we'll talk about the overall ACC implications in a second. But Chris Bell was incredible in this football game. That is a downright special athlete that I don't want to say could go in the first round, but should go very high in the NFL draft, because at 220 with that speed, I don't know how you find a better prospect. But 136 yards, 2 touchdowns. Isaac Brown is downright special. When that kid is fully healthy, he does things with the football that not a lot of running backs in the country can do. Like 10 yards per carry in this football game was absolutely dominant. For Louisville, suddenly you're staring down a doable schedule at 11-1. That sounds crazy, but there's a lot of things that happened around them that made their road just a little bit easier. They have a number of games that they should be able to win. You could find a way to 11-1, and we'll talk about the ACC maybe on Tuesday, maybe on Thursday, but there's a lot of chaos scenarios in the ACC. We'll probably get into that on Thursday, but you could have 4 different 11-1 teams at the end of the thing and have to figure out what's going on. For Miami, I don't think you have anything guaranteed. Now, I think you would have to have Louisville, Virginia, Georgia Tech pretty much all go 11-1 to fully knock you out, but not fully off the table. Georgia Tech's still undefeated with Georgia at the end of the year. Virginia already has a loss but has a very doable schedule. Same thing with Louisville. You're in a position where you could miss the ACC title at 11-1 and be 4th in the conference. I don't think that's going to happen. I tend to believe you're going to find a way to get back into this thing at 11-1 and possibly make the CFP, but you might need some help at the end of all this thing with how crazy the ACC is ending up being. But they're going to need some help. They have Stanford and then at SMU. You got to win out. That's the first goal, and then you got to hope that someone helps you out with Virginia losing, or maybe Virginia loses to Duke or Louisville loses to someone down the road and you find your way back into it. But Miami's got to get some help in the ACC moving forward. Nebraska 6, Minnesota 24. Nebraska did the thing again, and I think they left a CFP trip on the table because I think there's a lot of games coming forward that are super doable for this football team. You couldn't lose this one for it to happen. And you give up 9 sacks, and some of them are Dylan Raiola holding onto the football. Way more of them are this team's offensive line and offense in general just not being good enough in a lot of different ways. So the long rush was 12 yards in this football game for Nebraska. It was tough sledding in a lot of different ways. Credit to Minnesota. They beat Nebraska 6 times in a row. It's no longer a weird thing that happens. They're just dominating this football team every time they play. Drake Lindsey was really efficient. Darius Taylor continues to be one of the best running backs in the country. They're a team that finds a way to make plays. Now, I don't think they're going to make a run and find a way into the conversation for the Big Ten because they get Iowa next week. They also get Eugene later in the year. They could go to Eugene 7-2 on a Friday night, and that would be a really interesting game. There's no doubt about that. For Nebraska, you're still alive, but you have you got to beat USC in 2 weeks. You got to beat UCLA and Iowa after that. I think you missed a chance here. Now, still firmly in it. I think when you look at the Big Ten right now, it's the 3 teams up top and then everyone fighting for that 4 spot. You're not technically out of it, but got to play a whole lot better football up front if you're going to find a way to do it. Texas Tech falls to Arizona State 22-26. This is just one of those things where Texas Tech was finally mortal for a football game. Will Hammond did not play his best football, and I think it's one of those things that you're probably going to hear that brought up consistently during the CFP selection process, but at the end of the day, Baron Morton didn't play. Will Hammond comes in and really struggled until the very end of this football game where he's able to make one of the craziest throws I've seen in a while, but at the end of the day, not an elite performance offensively by a lot of guys in this football game. Sam Levitt and Jordan Tyson were downright special, especially Sam Levitt, as good as Jordan Tyson is and will be in the NFL. Sam Levitt just kept making big plays in this game. He kept running for his life and then chucking it 60 yards downfield on an absolute dime. 315 yards for him, 105 to Jordan Tyson, and a touchdown. A lot of off-schedule plays for Sam Levitt. He is a king at him, and he keeps Arizona State alive. It's a messy Big 12, and it'll kind of start to work itself out over the next couple of weeks, hopefully. But at the end of the day, Arizona State's still in it. Texas Tech, if they beat BYU and find a way to win out, I think Arizona State is in. We will get to the tiebreakers and all that craziness over the next couple of weeks, but at the end of the day, still work to be done, but a very fun team that has a coach that knows exactly how to press the right buttons at the right time. Houston on deck, Texas Tech, it's Oklahoma State, Kansas State, and then BYU. Both of them should be in position to make the CFP and possibly rematch for the Big 12 title, but might need a couple of people to get out of their way first. Memphis loses to UAB. I realize I have the score wrong. Apologies to UAB. UAB wins this one 31-24. How about Alex Mortensen? Good for him taking over this team. A very, very interesting process between him and Trent Dilfer, but he takes over this team. They're a 21.5-point underdog in this game, and they find a way to win outright. It was one of those games where Memphis just had absolutely nothing going offensively for much of this game. Brendan Lewis leads early in the game, and they just can't really get much of anything going. Iverson Hooks on the UAB side was downright special. 11 catches, 172 yards, and 3 scores. He was absolutely everything for that football team over there at UAB. For Memphis, you can take this L. As crazy as that sounds, you got a game against USF on Friday night that if you win it, you're going to be in really good position moving forward in the American. I still think the American champion is the one in the CFP at the end of the day, so you're okay. This is not a game you wanted to lose, but you're in a position where you beat South Florida next week. You're right back into the mix of things, and you're more than fine, but a great win for UAB and new interim coach Alex Mortensen here. And then we got some close calls. Texas A&M escapes this one 45-42 over Arkansas. They found a way to get out of a weird one. And frankly, if you thought the Texas A&M Arkansas game wasn't going to be weird, you're a little bit crazy. It was going to be weird. There was always going to be a weird game, and it kind of lived up to the hype. I think a lot of people are trying to dismiss A&M. I kind of understand it. They've beaten Arkansas, Mississippi State, Auburn. They've beaten the lower half of the Big Ten, of the SEC thus far this season. This is a really good football team. And like Georgia, in a lot of ways, they find a way to win, one way or the other. They find a way to make one more play than the team in front of them, and they find a way to win. We will see how it develops the rest of the season. They still got some tough ones, but this team should firmly be in the CFP and probably on their way to Atlanta by the end of this thing. I mean, they have Missouri, I believe. They have LSU coming up here pretty soon. They go 1-1 in those. They're going to be more than fine. They're firmly in the CFP, even if they lose to a Texas team that it doesn't look like they're going to lose to right now. So this team is firmly in the mix of things. They look like they're kind of rolling. Now, the defense got to play a little bit better going forward against elite offenses, but they absolutely have the ability to, and with that head coach, I think they can do a lot of special things. But we'll see what happens next week against LSU. That's a huge one. If they drop that one, maybe things get a little bit more sketchy, but tend to believe you're going to see Texas A&M in the CFP for the very first time this year. Missouri survives one over there at Jordan-Hare, and this one was weird. And Auburn does what Auburn does better than anyone in the entire country, and that's lose football games. It's insane how quickly they do this thing, and it's insane how consistently they lose football games. Without fail, every single time, there is an inexplicable play call by Hugh Freeze. And I'm not a play caller. I'm not a guy that he's forgotten more about football than I will ever know by 10 times. Here's the reality, though. You ran up the middle on 3rd and 8, and then you got mad at your quarterback for eating a sack on 4th and 8. I don't understand it. It's just one of those things where I don't get what's going on over there, and I think you got to eat it. I think you got to get rid of that guy as quickly as possible. I've been very forthcoming with, I don't want to say hate, my frustration. Yeah, I'll put it that way. My frustration with Hugh Freeze over the last couple of years, it just got to happen at this point. For Missouri, great win. You find a way to get it done. Zion Young with a little bit of trash talk before overtime, but backed it up in a lot of different ways. I'm a little bit worried about this team, but you get Vanderbilt this upcoming weekend, a huge chance to prove it, and then A&M. So you get 2 chances to really prove things. They could go 0-2. They could go 1-1 and still be firmly in the mix for the CFP. So a very good team that finds a way to win this game. Really ugly, but whenever you go down to Jordan-Hare, you just find a way to get a win and get out of it. I don't know what to make of Auburn. I think you got to make a change at head coach, and until you do that, I think you're going to be stuck in the same exact position. Texas, number 21 Texas, 16-13 over Kentucky. That was really bad. And this is something that does happen in the SEC. I want to get that out of the way for Longhorns fans first. It happens a lot. It happened last year to Georgia. They won 13-12. In Lexington, they find a way to win the SEC at the end of the year. Problem is Georgia looked a little bit better prior to the Kentucky game than they looked in the Kentucky game. This looked a whole lot like what Archie Manning looked like in the UTEP game, what he looked like before that in the Ohio State game. He missed a lot of open guys, and he got hit a lot in this football game. He did not get help from his offensive line. He did not get help from his run game. All of the stuff that we've been talking about the entirety of the year. he's also got to hit the layups. If he just hit the layups in this game, he went 12 for 27, had just over 100 yards, 132, I believe, no touchdowns. If he just hits the layups in this game, if he just hits the open receivers and misses everything else, he probably ends somewhere around 19 for 27, so 66%, around 250 yards and a touchdown. There were multiple plays where if he just puts it on the receiver, they can make a big time play after the catch. He's got to be better. And the offensive line has to be better, and the run game has to be better around him. But at a certain point, you got to help him out too. So he's got to be able to hit the open receivers when he has them. The run game's got to be able to help him out. The offensive line has to make sure that he doesn't get his head taken off back there. There's a lot of problems with this Texas offense, but Ryan Niblett bails you out. Once again, he has 2 returns of over 40 yards, sets Texas up with short field position. That led to 10 points. So without Ryan Niblett, you don't win this game. Without Mason Shipley, you don't win this game for Texas. You found a way to get a win. I talked about it last week. There's going to be a lot of weird stuff that happens. There was a lot of weird stuff that happened this past weekend. You found a way to win, sprint out of that building and try to figure out for Mississippi State. If they play like that, they will lose that game. I can promise you that. But at the end of the day, you gave yourself the privilege to be able to learn from your mistakes and still get a win and still be alive. Going forward, it's going to be tough to figure out what this team is going to be moving forward. It's going to be tough for them to find a way to 8 wins. As of right now, we'll see what happens against Mississippi State this upcoming weekend and then Vanderbilt right after that. But you can call it SEC tradition. Looked a whole lot like what this Texas offense has been all year, and they got to figure out a way to just scrape by a couple of points because you have a championship-level defense and special teams. You got to find a way to help them out with the offense, and I'm having a hard time believing that's going to happen this year. Washington State just keeps pushing people to the limit. Washington State loses to Virginia 20-22. This is just one of those games. I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened to Washington State over the last couple of weeks, but they're really dangerous. Credit to Jimmy Rogers, the head coach, that has done a great job with that program in very uncertain times, but they had 2 really tough games against Ole Miss and Virginia. They lose by a combined 5 points in those 2 games. They played really good football, and Virginia was really, really down in this football game. They were playing really bad football. We're down 10 going into the fourth quarter, and they find a way. They get a couple of touchdown drives, get a massive safety late in this football game, and that was enough. And you look forward at the schedule at UNC, at Cal, Wake Forest, at Duke, Virginia Tech. You get the win at Duke, you're probably in pretty good position to find a way to Charlotte, and then maybe you're playing Georgia Tech at the end of this thing with a win to go to the CFP. Weird times over there, but you find a way to win this football game again, like Texas, sprint out of that building and hope that it holds up because you find a way to win, you move forward, and the ACC is still very much on the table for this football team. But it was a weird weekend. There was a number of upsets, even on Friday night, going all the way back to Miami and in Nebraska. 2 teams that firmly were in the mix for the CFP that now are at least on uncertain ground. Still in it, but on uncertain ground, and Texas finds a way to escape. Texas A&M finds a way to escape. Missouri, it's a weird year in the SEC, and you find a way to get a win, you keep moving forward, but a lot of things to figure out specifically for Texas, I suppose, in that group of teams, but a lot of things to figure out for those teams, and we'll see if they can figure it out this upcoming week and get to big-time wins once again. But let's get into a little of a Week 8 whip around. We will get into Billy Napier. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about all the upsets and close upsets from this past weekend. Texas and Virginia just outright escape from their matchups. Texas Tech, Miami, Nebraska, all of those teams fall, including Memphis. A lot of games that totally change the foundation of what the CFP is going to be moving forward. But let's get into a little bit of a whip around. We have a number of things to talk about, and let's go ahead and start with the big one that everyone's talking about right now. Billy Napier has been fired after beating Mississippi State, the second person in the SEC that's been fired over the last couple of years after beating the Bulldogs, which has got to hurt just a little bit. But we'll talk about this much more in much more detail going forward into Tuesday and going forward after that. But there's a lot of things to say about Billy Napier, and we'll talk about it a lot on Tuesday. But I'm really impressed that this team never quit. There was a number of moments over the last 2 years where they could have quit, where he could have kind of packed it in, where this team could have just kind of said, well, we're not going to be able to get this one done. We're not going to be able to save his job. Let's just kind of save eligibility, move forward, and transfer out. None of those players did this. And even yesterday, they fought until the very last play for that guy, and they very obviously like him a lot. He wasn't winning the football games. That's the short and long of it, and there is no argument to be made here that he deserved to keep his job. It's just to say it's really hard to keep everyone as engaged as he did throughout this time. A lot of respect for him there. And this was a far from perfect game, but they found a way to get it done. Jaden Ball continues to prove that he might be the single most talented running back in the entire country. It's going to be a really interesting time over there at Florida, because I know for a fact if everyone around the country got their pick of rosters to kind of, let's say, pillage, for lack of a better term, I think Florida would be very, very high on the list. When you have DJ Lagway and Dallas Wilson and Vernell Brown and Jaden Ball, all of these guys are elite players that can do elite things at different places. Now, DJ Lagway, I get a little bit of pushback on, but I think if he's healthy and can practice, he can do some really incredible things. But overall, you got to try to keep guys around. If you're the new head coach, I don't know how easy that's going to be to do. So we'll talk about it more on Tuesday as this kind of unravels and we see just what it looks like. And I'll give my my group of names. I have one specific name that you call in until they say yes, pretty much. And I'll talk about that on Tuesday. But overall, you get a win to go out on. I guess that's the best I can put right now. For Mississippi State, they move forward to a game with Texas that they can win it and get within a win of bowl eligibility would be a massive thing for Jeff Lebby in year 2. For Florida, I don't know what it looks like. Going into Georgia, I like to think they're going to have juice because this team has had juice the last couple of times, but definitely something I'm a little bit worried about moving forward for this Florida team. We'll see. And we'll talk about it more on Tuesday. We'll get into all the craziness and we'll see what this looks like for Florida moving forward. I know you have a number of really good options. One that I would not be denied on, and we'll talk about that when it unfolds on Tuesday. The top of the Big Ten, roll on. Ohio State beats Wisconsin 34-0. That's the best team in football. I get it. It's Wisconsin. I understand that. I like to think I know football. That's an elite football team. Julian Sainz playing really high-level quarterback, 393 yards, 4 touchdowns, continues to grow up. The defense is just an outright nightmare. They get Penn State after a bye week. This team's rolling on, and I don't see them losing at least until Michigan, and we'll figure out what that looks like when we get there. Indiana gets a win 38-13 over Michigan State. Again, Fernando Mendoza looks like an incredible Heisman Mendoza, as they call it. 332 passing yards, 4 touchdowns. They should be 12-0. Now, they got to beat UCLA here coming up, who's now a hot team. We'll talk about that in a second, but they should be 12-0 heading into the Big Ten title, playing probably a 12-0 Ohio State. And then Oregon gets a 56-10 win over Rutgers. They were angry, and Rutgers was the punching bag. There's nothing more that needs to be said. They ran for over 400 yards in this football game. Very good team. Still has USC, Washington, Nebraska, those teams lost. They still have Wisconsin, Minnesota, USC, and Washington later in the season. This team should be in a CFP, whether it's 10-2 or 11-1. It doesn't really matter. I think it's going to be 11-1 though. Georgia Tech gets a win 27-18 over Duke. They found a way to get it done, and Duke handed them a lot of chances to do it. This first half for Duke was downright, it wasn't terrible, is the weirdest thing. There were multiple big-time mistakes, is probably the best way to put it. They marched down the field in the very first drive. At the 2-yard line, they fumble, and Georgia Tech takes it back the entire way to the house, goes up 7-0. Not the way you expected to start it if you're Duke. They march right back down the field. They botch a field goal snap, and Georgia Tech gets the ball back in. I don't think they scored on that drive, but at the very least, you gave Georgia Tech another opening. The rest of the time, it was Georgia Tech's game. The second that you let Georgia Tech stay in this game all the way to halftime, you were in trouble. And I think Duke understood that at the time. Georgia Tech outscores them 20-11 in the second half, and that was a late touchdown and 2-point conversion to take it from 20-3. It was 4 60-plus yard touchdown drives. Or scoring drives, not touchdown drives, in the second half for Georgia Tech. It's just a really good football team. Now, it's far from a perfect football team, and we'll see how they stack up against the elite teams of the country down the road. But at the end of the day, it's a tough football team that finds a way to stick in games and then makes enough plays late. It's going to be an interesting team to watch moving forward. Obviously, the game late against Georgia, they have Pitt right before that. They should be able to go undefeated the rest of the way in the ACC. We'll see how that unfolds the rest of the way. But 7-0 for the first time since 1966. Duke's got to feel like they want this back. I can promise you that, and we'll see what happens the rest of the way. I think they need some help to get back into things really in the ACC with that overall record of 4-3. But Georgia Tech gets Syracuse this weekend, then Pitt and Georgia later. It's a really good football team that finds a way to win football games, much like a team that we were talking about earlier that I'm now blanking on, A&M, much like a team that just finds a way to win football games. Going to be hugely important in a conference that is going to come down to a lot of weird moments. Michigan just dominates Washington 24-7 in this game. If that's the Michigan we get going forward, they could be the fourth CFP team from the Big Ten. I don't know what that looks like, is the big time question, because they got to win out at least up to Ohio State and then probably beat Ohio State again. So we'll see how that unfolds, of course, but a very efficient performance from Bryce Underwood. Andrew Marsh is a special player. He is the key to that offense moving forward because he can do so much stuff after the catch. Obviously has the elite hands with that one-handed catch. He's a great, great player. It's not going to be a crazy offense. It's not going to be an offense that does all types of explosive plays, but it's going to be a productive one. At least it can be a productive one, and if they find a way to keep that going all the way up to the Ohio State game, you're going to have a puncher's shot. We'll see what happens the rest of the season, but that's a Michigan team that can do some really good things. I've seen that before this season and hasn't quite come to fruition. But for Washington, I think they got to win out. They already have 2 losses. You have Oregon later on in the year. You have Illinois this upcoming weekend. It's going to be really tough. Possible, but really, really tough to pull off. Michigan should roll this weekend against Michigan State. They get Purdue, Northwestern, Maryland before that big one against Ohio State. So Michigan's still in it. The Big Ten is very, very weird in that you have 4 teams up top and then everyone fighting for that 4th spot, and I don't know who's going to get it or if anyone's going to get it by the end of the season. Maryland falls to UCLA. UCLA just keeps rolling on. It's the weirdest thing in the world, but it's a team that has found a way to get it done. 3-0 with the current head coach current coaching staff. The head coach took over one game before that, but they add Jerry Neuheisel to the mix after that and have kind of ripped the rest of the way. Now, the offense has taken a little bit of a step back the last couple of weeks, but they found a way to get it done with the defense. Tim Skipper has gotten these guys ready to roll. Jerry Neuheisel has done enough offensively to get this team moving, and even with a number of mistakes from Nico Imaliava and all these players on the UCLA offense, they did enough. And it's one of those things where it's going to be far from perfect, but they got an INT late, scored 10 straight points, and found a way to march down after a big touchdown drive from Maryland and get a big-time win. So UCLA moves forward. They got a big one against Indiana this upcoming weekend. I don't think they're going to win, but who knows with this UCLA team right now. They're playing really good football and continue to prove a lot of people wrong. Penn State loses by 1. This one hurt me. I'm not a Penn State fan. I like Penn State. I don't love Penn State by any means. This one hurt. This is tough. This is just one of those moments where you have a number of chances to win a football game. You just fall short. The offense continued to fall short. Ethan Grunkmeyer had a less than inspiring first start for his career, which makes sense against an Iowa defense. So not all that crazy, but you funneled the ball to Katron Allen, which is a win, I suppose. But at the end of all this, Terry Smith was always going to be fighting an uphill battle when he took over this job. That was not an argument. This one's going to get really ugly. 6-6 would be an outright miracle at this point. So it's going to get bad. You got a bye week, and then you get Ohio State and Indiana. Just kind of strap in and just hope for it to finish and find the new guy at the end of it. Now, we'll talk about that more on Tuesday, and it was an interesting thing I heard Brooks Austin bring up earlier that you're just not attacking this thing the way you probably should be. Why are you afraid to hire someone from a CFP staff? Why aren't you willing to take a guy that you know can win football games because you're going to be a little bit late on the portal? I get it. You got to get a lot of players in. I get you have a lot of different things to juggle, but overall, I'd get an elite coach. That's just me. But at the end of the day, we'll see how this unfolds. Iowa gets a close win. Penn State I think they're just hoping for the end at this point and a new head coach. We'll see who that ends up being. I have my pick. I talked about it a little bit earlier. We'll talk about it a little bit more on Tuesday. Another head coach that could come open, I think Mike Norvell might be cooked. As crazy as that sounds, after, 18 months ago? He was in line to possibly make a CFP, and now they're this. And I don't know what to make of it. First of all, hope that Thomas Castellanos is okay. Very scary moment late in that football game, but at the end of the day, you fall just short on the 1-yard line, and Stanford gets a win. I don't know what happened to this football team. That's not the same football team we saw in week one. It's not like Alabama is worse than Stanford and isn't playing good football, and Florida State was just terrible back then and is still terrible. I don't know what happened. I really don't. It was a better football team in week one. They fought really, really hard. They got fully up for that game, and they've laid down since. And it's totally inexplicable. It's relatively unexcusable. It's just ridiculous stuff from this Florida State football team. I don't know what you do. I think the reality is I don't know how you move forward with Mike Norvell. It's not to say that Mike Norvell is not a good coach. I tend to believe he actually is, but the reality is you go 2-10, you clear house, you get totally new players, a new coaching staff, new hires. You win a massive game in week one. You have every chance to take that as a galvanizing moment and move forward and continue to win football games, and you fold in a conference where you had it open for you, especially with the Miami team that can't stand success, seemingly. You had an opening, and you left it on the table. It's tough. It's a program that I think is going to find a new head coach, and I don't know what it looks like moving forward, but a lot to figure out down there in Tallahassee for Stanford. Good for y'all. You got to get a big-time win in the ACC, but a lot of things to figure out for Florida State. A little group of 6 scoreboard here. South Florida gets a big-time win over FAU, dominating them 48-13. Boise State dominates UNLV for much of this game, 63-24. Tulane gets one of the weirder wins over Army that I've ever seen. 2 touchdowns in the last 3 minutes, including the weirdest play in the world by Shaz Preston. Then you have JMU dominate ODU in the second half of this game. One of the weirder starts to a football game I've ever seen, but JMU able to get the win 63-37. And then Coastal Carolina gets a big-time rivalry win over App State 45-37. But overall, just a ridiculous weekend of football. A number of teams that probably should have lost that find a way out of it. A number of teams that did lose, and now you're questioning where they stand in the CFP. And a lot of big-time wins for big-time programs. But overall, I don't know what to make of all this. It is going to be really, really weird the rest of the season. There could be teams that are playing terrible right now that find their way into the CFP, teams that are playing great right now that totally fold down the stretch of the season. I don't know what to make of any of it. We'll be back on Tuesday to break down all the coaching hires. I'll give my top 25 in a blog tomorrow, so definitely be on the lookout for that. We'll get into coaching updates, maybe a rant or two, because there's a couple of things in college football that are making me mad right now, but at the end of the day, there are a number of things that are going to happen over the next 24 hours, and frankly, when I pick up my phone right now, I have a feeling there's going to be some type of news in college football, but Billy Napier's already been let go from Florida. I think Hugh Freeze, Mike Norvell, and a couple other guys could be following him. We'll get into it all. On Tuesday, we'll get into a couple of predictions for this upcoming weekend that's absolutely massive for that conversation that we just had, a number of things that are going to happen over the next little bit. We'll be back on Tuesday to break it all down and get into a little bit of the craziness that will be Week 9. But thank you so much for tuning in. Please do subscribe, like, comment, do all of that great stuff. It means the world to me. But thanks so much for tuning in. And I will see you guys on Tuesday to break down what I have to assume is going to be 3 or 4 coaching openings that we got to talk about. But thanks so much for tuning in. I will see you guys on Tuesday.